debate is now going is, it means that Mr. Mbeki, Mr. Zulu, and Kafrada and others, and I will actually be debating.
Not if you don't choose to, Mr. Van der Merwe, but if you're going to leave us,
it is part of the debate, and I hope that you will understand my position. As long as the African National Congress are a communist organization, and as long as they are bent on intensifying the armed struggle to kill and maim people to accomplish their political ends, there is no way that we will talk to them.
Let me just ask you one question. I understand you're leaving, and you have already indicated to me that if we brought Mr. Mbeki on the program that you would, and I told you we would, and so you are of course free to do what you have to do, and I'm free to do what I have to do. But let me just ask you before you go, why it is that you're so worried about talk? What is it? I mean, you seem to be not only a forceful, but a very intelligent gentleman who is able to express his opinion forcefully.
Flattery will bring you nowhere.
Well, it may bring this part of the conversation to a somewhat more abrupt halt. What I'm asking you is, why are you afraid of discussion? What is it that makes you nervous about it?
You are implying that I'm nervous or afraid. I am not. I am a soldier of the South African Defence Force, amongst others. I've been trained. I fought in the operational area. If it's necessary, I'll do it again. I fear nobody, including you. So it's not a matter of fear or that. It's a matter of...
well, if you want to speak... All right, well, come on up to the microphone, because we can't hear you, and you're wasting your time just yelling like that.
I'm not particularly interested in the rest of the world here, sir. I'm only interested, Mr. Van der Merwe, I'm the chairman of a group called Veterans for Victory, and I also served in the operational area. Obviously, they all know me because of the work I do. This audience is definitely loaded against you, sir, and I'd stand up, as I've stood up before in other meetings, and sir, I commend you because you're the only person with the strength of character and enough guts and enough balls to stand up and say what you really think, and to stand by what you really think. And I get mail comes through my letterbox every day from ex-servicemen, and I have a mailing list of over 7,000. And let me tell you something, sir, all of them support you and your party.
Where do they live?
They live in South Africa, ma'am.
Where do you live, sir?
Do you want to know? I live in Santon.
Oh, good.
I live just around the corner from you, ma'am.
Oh, my word, I must move.
Please do. Ma'am, Mrs. Sussman, I wish you would move, and I wish you'd take Mr. Bussock. Great Scott, I wish you'd go. And I wish you'd take the rest of the Nationalist Party and all the other people. Let me tell you something, ma'am.
You come from Australia?
I was brought up in Australia, yes.
That's what I thought.
Hold on just a second, folks.
Everybody says go home, huh? Let me tell you something.
No.
If I had gone home and people like me, you'd have had nobody at Kuvalai. I'll tell you that right now. You'd have had very few people on your borders.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could just ask for your indulgence for one moment. Hold on just a second. No, please. Let me just make one point.
Yeah.
First of all, one of the reasons you're here is that you were invited. One of the reasons that there are not more conservatives here is that it's my understanding...
Because obviously they weren't invited.
No, it's my understanding that the conservatives represent roughly 5%.
Oh, no way. That's jiggering of figures. Are you kidding? Let me tell you something. There was a meeting...
You and I are not going to spend the rest of this evening engaging in a debate. What I'm trying to get across to you, sir, is you've had an opportunity to express your point of view.
I have not expressed any point of view. I've just made a statement that I support that gentleman's views, the same as the majority of white South Africans who had common sense to.
I assumed that what you were doing was expressing your point of view. If you were expressing, well, then why don't you get to it? But
okay.
Let's see if we can just complete Mr. Van der Merwe's exit, though, because he's been trying very hard to leave.
Don't leave, Mr. Van der Merwe. Don't leave. Just don't talk to the sons of bitches, but don't leave. Sit there.
All right. It's all right. You'll be relieved. You'll be relieved to hear that at whatever time it is, 20 after 12 in the United States, most of the children are in bed, and even we have heard words like that before. Go ahead, Mr. van der Merwe.
Don't know where I was when I
You
got
were-
this unexpected supporter with, maybe I should say to him that I understand his feelings, but there are more refined and better ways of saying it. Let's leave certain words outside, but maybe he was emotional. And
Where we were, just to remind you, as I was asking you...
You were asking me why
we
don't I
can't-
talk to them?
Why we can't just engage in civilized
The
discussion.
point is that the ANC has certain non-negotiables. They are not prepared to discuss it, which is, amongst other things, that there must be a one-man, one-vote system in a common voters' roll, which simply means that there will be black majority government in this country, which means that black people will in future dominate South Africans instead of whites. We say that both should be scrapped. There should be no domination by one or the other. And the way that they go about is that there will inevitably be black domination and there will be third world poverty. But look, I have to go. I have to round it off by saying I
understand.
can't continue the debate.
Okay,
Ask Mr. Mayor one question, and
Surely.
please, you should answer me yes or no.
and this is Minister...
I don't beat my wife.
And the question is, are you still an incurable racist, yes or no?
No. I've never been an incurable racist. I've never been a racist. No.
Just yes or no.
No.
Just yes or no.
I'm not a racist. Can I now ask him, also on a yes or no basis? In the new South, he says, I've had my opportunity, I want to take another one. In the new proposed South Africa, is he prepared to accept Mr. Sisulu, Kathrada, or any of those Mandela as his president, yes or no?
Yes.
I'm talking to him.
Still beat your wife, yes or no?
Are you going, you see, you simply don't get an answer out of a gnat. You can even ask him what the time is and he says, I don't know. I want to ask him again in the new South Africa, what will the position be of my people? What is the position of Afrikaans as a language? What will the position be of the national anthem? What will the position be of the flag? I've asked this of them in Parliament. When the ANC comes with their non-negotiable demand that they want to nationalize the mines, the banks and everything, are they going to say yes or no? You don't get the answer.
Mr. van der Merwe,
Let me
you have been gracious enough to get up early this morning and join us, and so I wanted to give you every opportunity to say what you had to say.
Yeah.
I understand your position and the position of your party. You made it clear to me before. I thank you for being with us for as long as you have. But if you have to leave, please do. If not, please stay, and then we'll move on. Mrs. Sussman, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
want to remind,
She's a friend of mine. She can have another.
I'm not sure now.
You are, man.
Yeah, but just behave yourself. And don't associate with Australian racists. He should go back where he came from.
We really do need to move on, and
Can I
Mr.
say
van der
a few
Merwe,
words in conclusion?
No, I just wanted to tell you
I
that
think you've said your words in
taxes are paid by
conclusion.
blacks.
Ladies
and,
first. No.
Sir?
Look, Ted, I have to go.
I understand.
Sue me, my dear, just
Get back
sue
to the
me.
microphone, otherwise no one will hear you respond, okay?
No.
Yeah. Well, but we're here to do a television broadcast, not to listen to you privately.
Ted, can I,
Yes, sir, go
Can I
ahead.
say in conclusion that I thank you for this opportunity,
Thank you.
and that if the people from the ANC were prepared to abandon violence and to abandon these non-negotiables of them, which are completely unrealistic, then the times may change and we may consider in future to enter into debate with them. At this stage, the answer is no. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to the fair words. Goodbye. I'm going to have my breakfast now.
Please, before he goes, may,
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry, would you be good enough to identify yourself, sir?
Oh, another net.
Net.
Yeah.
He's got a microphone.
Sorry?
You have a microphone there, but I'm not sure that we can hear you, sir. So I'll tell you what. Just pull that microphone up a little bit and talk into it, if you would.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. Koos van der Merwe, old friend of mine, and with me you are prepared to debate, I hope. Advertised meetings. I would like to ask him one question. Last week in Pretoria, people displayed Nazi flags. They burned the Star of David, the flag from the country I come from, Mr. van der Merwe. Jews were called communists. Many of these people of the AWB are members of your party. Your leader, Dr. Truenecht, has kept quiet since that event. The question I want to ask you, on behalf of my two sons, serving officers in the South African Defence Force, are you going to have Nazi flags at your meeting? Are you going to burn the Jewish flag? Are you going to introduce the 1,000-year Reich in South Africa? Answer.
I will gladly answer you. But Slow-Mo, we are good friends, and I really don't think you were fair to ask me those questions, because you know what my answer would be, that we are against that form of rubbish. We repudiate it at all completely. You want another answer, Slow-Mo? Because I really feel that you've let me down this morning. You know I repudiate that.
All right.
I don't know why you asked the question. We repudiate it. We don't like it. We have disapproved of it. We have said it so openly.
No, I thank you very much. I'm delighted. But you haven't said this since the demonstration in Pretoria, and you must say so in Parliament, and then you'll gain my credibility.
All right.
No, I still have your credibility. I'm saying it to the audience here. I'm saying it to the world. I will say it in Parliament, but it's unnecessary, Slow-Mo, because you know that we don't approve of that. Ladies and gentlemen, my breakfast is waiting. Good day.
Thank you, Mr. van der Merwe. Good to see you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be coming back with the rest of this program, and as you can see, no way of telling where it will lead. But I hope the debate will become a little more, not more spirited, but a little briefer in some of the comments that are made. We'll be back in just a moment.
Dear Michelin, in the last 6 years...
Johannesburg, Ted Koppel.
And we are back once again. It is shortly before 7:30 in the morning. Things are beginning to liven up a little bit here. Still standing by very patiently in Lusaka, where he has been listening for the past 10 minutes to the reasons why the member of the Conservative Party would not speak with him, is Mr. Thabo Mbeki. Mr. Mbeki, the other day, I had the opportunity to speak with the President of South Africa. Can you still hear me right now, or are we still having sound problems with Lusaka?
I can hear you.
Okay, very good. The other day when I spoke to President de Klerk, I asked him whether you and people like Joe Slovo would be completely free to come back to South Africa. You might be interested in hearing his answer.
Yes, I would be, certainly.
Stand by, and I hope we're going to have it for you in just a second.
We'll have to discuss that, because there is fear amongst some of them that on their return they might be arrested.
Are they right to be afraid of that?
Well, we want to solve that. It is a problem which has to be addressed and which has to be solved. And
So the answer is yes.
The reason.
Some of them might be.
Well, technically, in terms of the law, yes. Some of them will be guilty, and not only technically, actually some of them might be guilty. And obviously in a situation like this, one will have to address it. One will have to work out structures as to how people can clear their positions. One will have to decide exactly what will be pardoned and what can't be pardoned. So it is a question, once again, for negotiation. Everything in South Africa is crying out for people to drop their pretenses, to stop making excuses, and to start talking to us.
All right, Mr. Mbeki, what do you think? Did that sound like an open welcome mat to you?
Well, it perhaps is a step in the right direction, Ted. There's a fundamental basic mistake which F.W. de Klerk and his colleagues made, which was to define a lot of people out of the category of political prisoners by claiming that if somebody was involved in a military action which resulted in the death of a soldier or of a police, that person was guilty of murder or terrorism or something like this. If this had been recognized from the first instance, that these were political actions deriving out of a commitment to resist apartheid, then this problem would not be there. But if de Klerk is ready to discuss this question and find a solution so that we can get a lot of people who are political prisoners out of prison, so that we could create this climate conducive to negotiations, yes, I would say it is a step in the right direction. What he has just said, that he's ready to discuss the matter, so hopefully it can be resolved so that there ought not to be any political prisoner in South Africa.
Let me turn to the representative of the South African government, Minister Stoffel van der Merwe. How do those negotiations take place? I mean, even talks about talks, which is the phrase we've been hearing now for the past couple of weeks, they have their own internal dynamic. They create their own internal problems. Who's going to talk to whom? And who gets involved in these talks?
Well, obviously, the government is a central partner in this at this point in time. So therefore, it has to be involved. But we are talking about talking at this point. Anybody, the ANC is now represented openly inside South Africa. So any of the ANC representatives can approach any member of the government. If they do not approach members of the government, we will probably be approaching them, because we know that there are issues such as this that has to be resolved by talking. And as we talk, we can edge nearer and nearer to one another up to the point where we can stop shouting and sit down at the same table and do some serious negotiations.
How long do you think that's going to take?
Well, that depends. It takes two to tango. So it depends on both parties. From our side, we are ready for it. We are waiting for it. We can do so as from today.
Let me introduce, and I introduced him a moment ago, but I need to do it one more time. Let me introduce another member of our panel here. Keith Musa Zondi is National Chairman of the Inkatha Youth Brigade, the youth wing of Zulu Chief Buthelez's political organization. You were engaged until very recently in negotiations with the United Democratic Front in an effort to get some of the violence stopped. Those negotiations broke down. Why?
Well, I don't think that it is entirely correct that they have completely broken down.
They're not ongoing.
Well, I think we are talking about two levels. There were negotiations that were at a local level in the township of Mpumalanga near Hammarsdale that broke down a day or two ago. But I think then there were negotiations between representatives of UDF, COSATU on the one hand, and Inkatha on the other hand. And I think those really are at a phase where they have just been de-escalated to deal with the kind of problems that arose out of technicalities of, relating to representations. But I do really think that at the moment we have talks going on, even though we have, representatives reduced to two per side.
It's my fault because I'm the one who focused on the talks. But basically what I'm trying to get to is a much deeper issue. There are deep-seated differences between Inkatha and between members of the United Democratic Front. When I say deep-seated differences, even that is an understatement. You're killing each other on an almost daily basis. Now, it seems to me quite clear that before anybody can sit down at a table and talk to one another, that their followers have got to stop killing each other. Doesn't that seem reasonable to you?
Well, it does. Actually, the violence is quite a tragedy. But I think really we sometimes overestimate the differences because, in my view, if we're talking about principles, if we're talking about what the UDF stands for and what maybe the ANC stands for, I don't really think that there are major differences there. I think, in my view, differences exist when it comes to strategy and tactics, some specific tactics and strategies.
Let me get a quick reaction from another one of our distinguished guests down here in the audience, Mr. J. Naidoo. He is the General Secretary of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, which is the largest trade union federation, I believe, in South Africa. When you hear this kind of, well, I'll put the same question to you that I just posed to your colleague over here. How in heaven's name can anyone sit down together when your people are killing one another on a daily basis?
Well, I welcome the statement made by the representative in Qatar. We had negotiated a very substantial document that dealt with an overall process towards ending the violence, with a number of steps included, that would have created the climate that we need to allow us to sit down and negotiate an end to the violence. That has not succeeded. And we welcome the remarks by the Inkatha representative that they do not see any major obstacles to that continuing. We believe that what is required is, particularly from the side of the government, to act decisively against the involvement of the police in colluding in what we have seen with certain elements that have orchestrated this violence. We have called consistently for a commission of inquiry into the role of police in this conflict in South Africa.
We have a representative of the police with us, and I'm going to ask him to comment in just a moment. But first, once again, I would like to sort of set up the issue for our American audience. We have a piece on black violence that was prepared for us by our correspondent, Don Klatstrup. Let's go to that now.
In the dark of the night, 11 boys tried to hide themselves in sleeping bags to protect themselves from a nightmare they had just experienced.
They come with their guns. They not talk with us. They just come to shoot us.
It happened here, in the Table Mountain region of Natal Province. Every house in this village was burned. Several people were killed. Another example of violence committed by blacks against blacks.
It's a power struggle which has gone bad. And it's become rooted in a pattern of revenge, counter-revenge, more revenge. In other words, reaction and counter-reaction.
Our comrade must be avenged, they chant. Someone must pay. The price has been high. Up to 3,000 killed in the past 2 years, and nearly 70 since last weekend.
We're left with no option. There's literally no protection on our side. So that people have been forced into taking the kind of law in their hands, so to speak.
Nelson Mandela has warned that the carnage in Natal provides a glimpse of what could happen in the rest of the country unless blacks begin working together. That could prove difficult.
There has developed this culture of killing for no apparent reason. People no longer know why they are really fighting.
The biggest obstacle of all now to the liberation of South Africa is caused by this black-on-black violence. I mean, we blacks are still busy butchering each other.
And it hasn't been only in Natal. Most of the bloodletting is between two factions, an anti-apartheid coalition called the United Democratic Front, or UDF, and a Zulu-based organization called Inkatha. But among these young warriors, politics has little to do with it.
It's a culture of feuding, fighting, killing. It's almost as if you earn your manhood as a young adolescent by participating in some way.
Because much of the trouble is rooted in tribal conflicts that go back centuries, many despair of finding a solution. What about Mandela, she is asked. Is he the answer?
I don't think.
Her son shakes his head. But as violence escalates, there is another fear.
If we want to be a peaceful democracy, this is precisely the kind of thing which will threaten it. It'll force whatever government, whether it be the present government or a future government which is non-racial or black or whatever you like, it'll force them to eventually become authoritarian.
Sometimes, in the lush green hills of Natal, it is easy to forget the carnage. The paradise setting gave this region its name, Edendale Valley. Today, it goes by another name, the Valley of Death. Don Cladstrup for Nightline in Natal Province.
And we are back once again live at the University of the Witwatersrand. And a moment ago, I began to introduce Brigadier Leon Millet. If you'd be good enough to stand, Brigadier, if you can do it without pulling the microphone off. He is the chief spokesman for the Ministry of Law and Order. It'll just be a little easier for us to see you if you can do that. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had your briefcase. The question that was raised before, the issue of protection. Give me your notion of why it is and how it is that this violence is able to continue unabated.
Well, Ted, first of all, I think we are saddened by the senseless killing. Also because we have lost in the vicinity of 20 of our own men. About 104 have been seriously injured. We can literally flood the area with policemen. We can flood it with troops. But that would only curb the issue. I don't think that would solve the issue. We are standing and we are hoping that we can get all the responsible parties together. I would like to agree with Mr. Mbeki. Let's get everybody together. Churches, church groups, policemen from both sides, from the South African police, from KwaZulu police, COSATU, UDF, the ANC. Then only, if we sit down, then we may find a recipe for a total solution and a lasting solution to the problem.
Let me make sure that I understand what you're saying. You are proposing, what, sort of a side set of negotiations between the Ministry of Law and Order and all of these groups, and you would be prepared to sit down with all of these groups or representatives of all of these groups to work out the problems?
We certainly would. We have gone further. We have asked for a kind of a working committee, perhaps under the chairmanship of a judge, a retired judge. And everybody can give their insights from police side, from socioeconomic side, from whatever. And then I think we will be able to find the true solution to a very serious problem. The fighting in Natal has been an ongoing issue. We've had tribal fighting for many, many years. There are many revenge killings taking place at the moment. There is a lot of crime, gun running to the area. The political issues are no longer the main issues.
All right, let me just get a reaction from Mr. Mbeki and Lusaka. I understand we're going to lose our satellite feed to Lusaka before too much longer. What about this kind of a negotiation? Would you be prepared to designate a representative to sit down at such talks, Mr. Mbeki?
Yes, certainly. Certainly the ANC would be ready to do anything at all, to make sure that this killing in Natal stops.
Standing at the microphone, is that Popo Malefi? I can't see with the lights in my eyes.
Yes, that is correct.
Please come on up to the microphone. You had would you be good enough to identify yourself and your association and then pose your question or make your comment?
Well, I'm Malefe, the General Secretary of the United Democratic Front.
And you have a comment or a question that you wanted to pose or a comment you wanted to make?
Well, I want to state here that my organization, the United Democratic Front, is deeply concerned about the situation in Natal. We have committed ourselves to finding ways and means of ending that violence as soon as possible. And that is in line with our policy of commitment to non-violence as a means of ending bloodbath in our country as soon as possible.
Mr. Molefe, if I may interrupt you for just one moment. Everyone is, in public, on occasions like this, committed to dialogue, conversation, ending bloodbath. Explain to me why the bloodbath continues.
Well, it is very difficult to explain. That situation in Natal is fairly complex for us to understand. But what concerns us most is that the police in that situation have been implicated on many occasions.
In what?
There were allegations that the police were seen supporting certain groups which were attacking others.
Which groups?
In particular, in Inkatha, especially the KwaZulu police. The affidavits were written with all these allegations. It is not clear to us as to precisely what the authorities are doing to act decisively to end this violence. This is what concerns us most. I think one other way of addressing the problem would perhaps be to set up an independent commission of inquiry, which would include respectable members of the public as well as well-known members of the judiciary. And they could formulate a report which would then be tabled, which would set out precisely what the causes of violence in that region are, and on the basis of that, then there should be an immediate action on the part of the government. For our part as an organization, we would continue to intensify negotiations in that regard, and I think what we need to do is to intensify the negotiation on the ground. It should not only take place at the level of the top leadership, because it is not the top leadership that is fighting each other, but the ordinary people on the ground. We have to find ways in which they could perhaps set up, say, peace committees, which would include supporters of Inkatha, supporters of the UDF, COSATU, etc., and to work out the way in which they could control violence at the local level.
Mr. Molefe, thank you. We have to take another break. When we come back, I'd like to point out that we also have some very distinguished observers of the South African scene, the great novelist Nadine Gordimer and the great writer and journalist Alistair Sparks. I hope that they will also shed a little light on what they think is going on in South Africa at the moment. All of that when we return.
Nightline in South Africa. A town meeting will continue in a moment.
When this was Grandfather's desk, every week I'd help Grandma polish it with Pledge. I'd spray, she'd wipe, and together we'd bring out its beautiful shine. Now that the desk is mine, I use touchable Pledge, so even smears just disappear.
Pledge, still shining after over 30 years with no buildup. And with new touchable Pledge, smears just disappear.
Grandma's gonna love it.
New touchable Pledge, still no buildup, new touchable shine.
It was Thursday. Coming home from the theater, it started.
At Meineke, we can't always tell what's wrong with a car by the sound of the customer, but we can tell a lot from our free undercar inspection. We check your exhaust system, shocks, brakes, and more at no charge. Then you'll know the price before any work begins.
It's so annoying.
So bring your car to Meineke. We'll give you a lift without taking you for a ride.
Take off for the charm of Europe and the intriguing kingdom of Mandora, where two brothers vie for a king's crown.
You and you alone deserve to be the ruler of Mandora.
Things are not as they appear in Mandora, not by a long shot.
The American women are returning to their quarters in the palace.
There's danger, Megan. To you and to Sarah. He wouldn't be above using Megan to get to me and to the throne.
Join the mystery and romance on One Life to Live.
Now that's what I call a royal welcome.
It's Velveeta versus cheddar. Our Velveeta melts much better. Cheddar's lumpy, cheddar's oily. It dribbles off your plate onto your doily. See Velveeta melts so creamy. It improves your tetrazzini. When the cookbook calls for cheddar, make it with Velveeta, it cooks better.
I got caught in a love triangle up at Taco Bell. When I tried that new steak taco with a salt tortilla, yeah. And then I took a bite of the new chicken taco and it stole my heart as well. And I was already in love with that original taco with the crunchy shell.
Steak and chicken tacos just 99 cents at the new Taco Bell at North Point Shopping Plaza and other locations.
I got caught. I better run for the border.
Glamour Isle, locally owned and operated and the home of women's fashions at moderate prices, serving the heart of Illinois for over 39 years. I'm Bob Catay from Glamour Isle. I'm here to express my enthusiasm and support for the Buy Heart of Illinois First campaign. This campaign is designed to help keep dollars spent here in the heart of Illinois. So join us at Glamour Isle by investing in your community and buy Heart of Illinois First.
Nightline in South Africa, a town meeting continues. Reporting from Witwatersrand University in Johannesburg, Ted Koppel.
We are going to lose our satellite to Lusaka in just another 10 minutes, so I want to give an opportunity to Mr. Thabo Mbeki and also to Minister Stoffel van der Merwe to engage in a couple of exchanges. Before we do, though, I would like all of you to take a look at, and Mr. Mbeki, if you'd be good enough to listen to, an excerpt from an interview that I did yesterday with Mr. Nelson Mandela. It was on the subject of armed struggle. Let's give a listen. Mr. Mandela, you've spoken about the need to keep the armed struggle going. You have not defined what that means. Does it mean simply keeping people in place or actively keeping the armed struggle underway?
Well, the armed struggle is a method we have been forced to resort to, not out of choice, but because of the violence of apartheid and the closing of all channels of communication,
but you have
of
also
expression. And therefore, the armed struggle must go on as before. Nothing has happened insofar as that is concerned.
No modification in the armed struggle. In other words, not even something like a ceasefire in place.
No. You must appreciate that what we are busy with at the present moment is an attempt to create a climate conducive to negotiations. The preconditions for that is that the government should meet the demands that were made, which we feel are necessary to normalize the political situation in the country. The government has not done that.
What I said at that point to Mr. Mandela, I now say to you, Minister Stoffel van der Merwe. It almost sounds like the irresistible force, or the meeting between the irresistible force and the immovable object. On the one hand, here is Nelson Mandela saying the armed struggle has to continue for as long as the government maintains its policies, and one of those policies that he's referring to, of course, is the state of emergency. On the other hand, the government takes the position that the state of emergency cannot be lifted as long as there is violence. How is that ever going to be resolved?
Well, I sincerely hope that one should also pay attention to the other statements which Mr. Mandela has made, to say that he is committed to peace, his organization is committed to peace. So that creates a sort of dichotomy in the ANC point of view, and one sincerely hopes that that is the beginning of an opening which one could use to arrive at a normalized political situation.
Mr. Mbeki, you see it as a dichotomy, first of all, and to what degree can it be used, and if so, how can it be used?
No, I don't think it is. I think Nelson Mandela explained this thing very well and very correctly. And really, in our view, this is not a very difficult, insuperable problem. Because, for instance, the ANC has on many occasions said it is committed to a political solution of the South African question. I think you'll remember, Ted, that earlier in your current series in these programs, Pig Water said that one of the mistakes that they had made was that in the past they had not responded to the requests of the ANC, offers of the ANC to negotiate a resolution of this problem. So I'm saying that the ANC is committed to a peaceful solution of this question. Therefore, that ought to reassure F.W. de Klerk that indeed, let's get rid of the states of emergency. Let's release the political prisoners. let's get rid of this repressive legislation so that indeed we do then have this climate conducive to negotiations and enter into a situation where we can then deal with this question of violence from both sides.
In an interview, I believe with the BBC, Mr. Mbeki, Mr. Mandela also said, I mean, he spoke quite specifically about the armed struggle in terms of it being directed against government installations, or that the struggle would continue against government installations. Given the steps that President de Klerk has taken over the last couple of weeks, doesn't it seem a little excessive to be talking about operations? I mean, I understand that you're not prepared to have your people stand down yet, or start beating their swords into plowshares, but doesn't it seem a little excessive to still be talking about operations against the government?
No, but Ted, you also have an actual reality of police actions, for instance, against peaceful demonstrations. And I'm sure during these days that you've been in South Africa, you must have seen some of those. And we're saying the state of emergency, the Internal Security Act, permits the police precisely to carry out that kind of operation, to use such force as in their estimation is sufficient to whatever. This is provided for in the sorts of laws and regulations. So, I mean, there's an actuality. There's a real situation of police violence against the people. And in a situation of this kind, it really is quite unfair to expect that the ANC would then say, all right, we will lay down our arms, we fold our arms, when there's no movement from the other side on these really actual things that are happening to people.
All right, let me get a response from Minister van der Merwe.
The police, whether under the state of emergency or not, they are required to behave within certain prescribed limits of decency. If they do not, then we disapprove and the other people disapprove of that. Those are not the police as such. Those are certain individuals against whom should be acted. If we agree amongst one another what the norms for police behavior should be, and we would then apply those norms jointly, then we can solve this problem, this excuse that some people are using of police action.
All right. Go ahead, Alan. I'm
Can
sorry.
I just ask a question then? Because it is a very, very important thing here. We have been engaged in peaceful protests now since last August. Some of these protests have been allowed, other protests have been brutally beaten apart by the government or by the police. Are you now saying, Dr. van der Merwe, that should we engage in any kind of peaceful protest again, and you have the kind of action from the police that we have experienced so often, we can then actually lodge a complaint against those policemen or the people who were in charge of that, and you as a government will act against them publicly so that our people can see that it is really true what you are saying? Because I'm afraid just two weeks ago, I was tear gassed for leading 300 squatters just to hand over the petition. And the man told me it is not under the state of emergency but the Internal Security Act that he was doing this. So I would like to know, can I now say to him, if you do this again, I'll take you to the government and you will be punished or you will be disciplined in a way that my people can see that this is happening. If this doesn't happen, the whole question of trusting the government and taking its word on these issues still remains very much in the air.
You say you've been demonstrating peacefully.
Yes.
Yet many cars have been damaged, shops have been looted, and so forth. I agree that the vast majority of the demonstrators behaved themselves excellently under most times. Also, the vast majority of the police have behaved excellently. If we can get together to punish both the police and the rioters that overstep the line, because the police are supposed to act within certain prescribed limits of the law and of decency. Any man that oversteps that line needs to be punished, and that will be done.
Minister, if you'll forgive me for just a moment, we're going to lose our satellite to Lusaka in just a couple of minutes, and I gather we have a question over here for Mr. Mbeki.
Yes, Mr. Mbeki, the question I address to you, sir, is, as a concerned young white South African, How can you reassure me, sir, that you are committed to a peaceful solution in South Africa? What you are in fact doing, sir, and I welcome the ANC, I believe that everyone has to play a rightful place in South Africa.
Get to your question, because we're going to lose the satellite in 1 minute.
Please reassure me as a young white South African that you're committed to a peaceful solution. So then finally all our fears can go away and we can all basically live in harmony once again.
All right, Mr. Mbeki.
I would say we can give that reassurance 1,000 times. If I knew the young person's name, I would want to introduce this person to Walter Sisulu, who was there, to Nelson Mandela, so that they can talk to that person.
Well, Walter Sisulu is here, and this young man is still here, and if Mr. Sisulu is willing, we can do that after the program.
I think that would be good, because it's very important that white youth ought to understand that the ANC is very, very committed to ending this problem, precisely because the ANC is against all this terrible suffering that apartheid has meant to our people.
All right, before we lose you totally, and I understand we're seconds away, Thabo Mbeki, thank you very much. I know you had to get up early in the program to be, early in the morning to be with us. It was very, very good of you.
Thanks, Ted.
Okay, now, there is one gentleman who has been sitting here very, very patiently on the panel, and I have not yet had an opportunity to go to him, and that is Johan Heens, leading member of the Dutch Reformed Church, which really, in the old days, provided the sort of moral underpinning for apartheid. I wonder if you would sort of take us off in a somewhat different direction for a moment, Dr. Heens, and give us the reasons that the Dutch Reformed Church leadership has now changed its attitude toward apartheid.
I think you're correct that my church, indeed in the 40s, not only supported the political model of apartheid, but even tried to give it a biblical ethical justification, out of which came a sort of a apartheid theology. But we've came back on that. We said that was wrong because we have misused Scripture. Scripture is not a political handbook. Scripture does not give you any justification for any political model whatsoever, be that of integration or segregation. The Bible is not a political handbook. And the reason why we came back on this and made a very, very clear U-turn, I would say, in '86, in October, in the synod we had in Cape Town, was this very reason that we saw the very essence of the Bible as a book not of political models, but a revelation of God's will as far as certain basic ethical norms are concerned. And that was the reason why we did what we did. As a matter of fact, I personally believe that what we have in South Africa, in linking up with what I'm saying now, and thinking of what we have experienced here lively this morning, is that we do not have in South Africa primarily a political problem. We have primarily at the root of all a religious ethical problem. And by that I mean that unless we are going to accept one another as human beings, unless whites and blacks are going to accept one another as human beings created in the image of God with certain basic human rights and basic human responsibilities, unless we're going to do that, we will never ever hammer out jointly a solution for this country. We have to respect other people. We have to accept other people for the fact that we, and now I'm using a term that has been used in the past exclusively for the whites, we are all planted by God in this country, not only the whites. We are God's plantation in this country, and we have to accept one another, and on that basis we have to hammer out jointly a new South Africa. And unless we're going to have that, what I like to call a transformation of heart, unless we're going to have that complete new attitude towards one another, we will never ever have a solution for our problems, because I believe that we do not have a problem which can be solved only by new structures.
Professor Haynes,
we have to have new people in this country.
Professor Haynes, let me interrupt you just for a moment to go to an old friend and colleague, Alistair Sparks. Stop scribbling for a moment. You're not a reporter here today. If you'd be good enough to stand up for a moment, Alistair, so that the camera can see you. You wrote in a wonderful new book, if you can grab onto your microphone there so that we can hear you, you wrote in a wonderful new book, The Mind of South Africa, that'll be coming out in a couple of months in the United States, about the Dutch Reformed Church, sort of an old line that it used to be known as the National Party at Prayer. And it was also used, in a sense, as Dr. Haynes has mentioned, as the moral underpinning for apartheid. Now that that moral underpinning is gone, are we really seeing the end of that?
Yes, Ted, I think that's really where the change begins. I think once the moral basis of apartheid was removed, it became, as an ideology, as dead as communism is in Eastern Europe now. But I would add this. I think the U-turn by the Dutch Reformed Church and now by the government is tremendously important. But there are chickens that are coming home to roost. And we have, in this session here today, talked at some length about the violence in Natal. We have taken note of the problem of the ANC's commitment to armed struggle. These are products of the past. Now, the violence in Natal is a direct consequence, an outgrowth of a policy of divide and rule that has gone on in this country for generations. Not only in Natal have we seen this, we've seen it in the big squatter camp of Crossroads, where agents, warlords have been set up as part of the repressive machinery. And this is one of the sources of black-on-black violence that has turned morbid in the country. And to a large extent, the armed struggle of the ANC is an outgrowth of a situation that is saturated with violence. These are the legacies of the past.
Alistair, let me stop you only to ask whether indeed, I mean, what you're saying is that the white government was responsible for setting black groups one against the other. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed.
Are they still doing it?
I think we are left with a great deal of it, and I think that some of it does continue. And certainly the police force, a great many of whom support Mr. Koos van der Merwe's Conservative Party, and a good many of them support its extreme wing, the Afrikaner resistance movement, which is in danger of turning into a guerrilla arm. Yes, they are still involved in this kind of activity. Like the government's support for Renamo in Mozambique, once you start these things, they are awfully difficult to stop.
Minister van der Merwe, I have to remind you, you all have your microphones on, so when you're sort of whispering to one another, I'm afraid we're getting little bits of it, and we'd like to hear what you have to say in toto.
Telling you what I've just said.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Sussman. We'll be wondering the rest of the evening if you don't.
No.
All right, Minister van der Merwe, if you find that there are military units or police units that are in any way encouraging this black-on-black violence, for example, as Alistair Sparks has just suggested, what will you do about it?
Once again, one must say, of course, like in any society, no country's people are composed of angels. One always have problems, but the policy is one of strict neutrality for the armed forces. And anyone who is caught, who can be proven that he is overstepping the line of strict neutrality, will be punished, will be taken out of the force. Fair enough, this may not have been so all the time, but that is the case now. That is the policy now.
Let me introduce another gentleman who's been sitting. Lieutenant Rockman, you want to stand up there for a minute while I introduce you? Lieutenant Gregory Rockman. Lieutenant Rockman created a furor within the South African police force last year when he charged his fellow riot squad members with brutality, and I think the phrase you used was that they were behaving like wild dogs.
Yes, they are still, yes.
That must not have been a phrase that made you enormously popular with your colleagues.
No, definitely not with my colleague here, Brigadier Millet, because he's still investigating the matter. But we know that is the tendency. Can you just ask your question?
Yes, I will. The question really was whether I'm hearing a lot of wonderful rhetoric here today. And I wondered if you could just give us the benefit of your experience as to what it is really like on the ground. And you know, perhaps you have your own particular biased point of view, but we're hearing a lot of biased points of view here today, and I think everyone's entitled to his. So give us a sense of what it is like within the South African police force, and to what degree violence is precipitated by the police.
Well, to make it quite clear to you, as I'm standing here today, tomorrow they will charge me again. But I'm not scared of that.
Charge you with what?
For speaking to the press again. That is, I'm on trial for that again, but I don't want to explain that.
You mean internally within the...
Yes, internally. I'm supposed to appear today, and I've made an excuse at a trial that I'll come late there, because I've got an important meeting on today to address people, which I think, which are here to negotiate for a non-racial and democratic South Africa. It's not a conference, but we are here to share views and ideas and how we can find a peaceful solution, which the government has denied me. I will tell you why. I've written a letter to President de Klerk. He didn't even have the dignity to reply to my letter. And I say, I'm just an ordinary citizen, and he needs to reply to my letter. Because they say that they are ready for negotiations. I made an appointment with them to negotiate with them about the police matters, and they refuse it to me up until today.
Lieutenant, do me a favor. First of all, let me make a couple of points. I mean, presidents get a lot of letters, and they can't answer all of them. I hope you understand that. But secondly, my question to you was, give me some specifics of what happens on the ground, the kind of thing that instigates violence, if indeed that happens, and if indeed that is what you are charging.
Yes, on the ground I can tell you what is happening on the ground. If I take for specifically what happened in Mitchell's Plain, where I was monitoring, you know, my whole situation from the 1st of August up until the 5th of September in 1989. What actually happened there is that, you know, police, especially white policemen, and I'm not racist when I say that, because that is what they actually did. They come into the townships, you know, with their biased ideas, and when they get out, let us shoot at these people, you know. Or they come and they say, why? Like, for instance, when I was negotiating with demonstrators and asking them, but why are you